Anytime that I could've died, lucky Sonny Slim got 100 lives. Knock the rings out and I'ma fit my pinky with it. Fuck a Jada Pinkett, I get jiggy with it. You with it, then we can get it going. Talking big shit and you just a semi-colon head of the state, and I cannot be demoted. I put his head on the stake and make him hold it 2 out the meter. Can't say too many ways that I need her. It's a bread on the plate, she a eater. Need some bread on the plate for the feature. I'm a beast, look boy, I'm a creature. Ain't no money to make for me being tame. For I tell on myself I'm a plea insane. There's some folks in here with me, yo, keep it chained, and I swear. They keep talking all around my head, I hear it all day. I hope nobody don't tell the end alright. Cause I'ma send in the hell and then y'all wait. Gon' probably send me to hell, I need peace sign. For my shoulder, devils on east side. Now who's stronger, man, I'm getting deep fried. But I'm colder than a white polar until I'm over. Trying to stay woke in a high full of sleepers. I can leave earth anytime, no allegiance. Fuck all these hoes on that line too egregious. And it be real one time for the region. I cannot get peace someday. Or just a little sleep someday. I know we gon' eat someday. And if the time divine, it won't be too late. Now it's a balance I've been trying to figure. In and out at times in my little feelings. My Valentine ain't want no dealings. And I can't blame you about that really. Cause ain't too much stable going on. Ain't nobody to say you on your own. I done took out a page from Rolling Stones. Advice might short the days and write the songs. Meanwhile, I'll engage in other things. Dazing off the other dreams. Another page, another ream. And I still can't explain just what I see. Maybe I went made to walk, the wings fell off. And now I'm trapped inside the thought. They birthed the flock. Glad they brought the church to talk. Cause I need something to believe in. So make me believe. Keep talking all around my head. I hear it all day. I hope nobody don't tell the end alright.
What do you got? Ringside seats doing ethnic cleansing.
Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Stand on Business podcast. I am your host, Boss Man. Welcome, everybody, and welcome and happy hump day to everybody. It's been a crazy day, crazy week in the realm of politics. And yes, we're going to continue with part 5. Technically, I would say part 6, but the way I've done all of this and rearranged all of this so far, it is technically part 5 of the State of Our Union Constitutional Trepidation. All right. The dictator targets elections. All right. So tell you what, let's go ahead and get some things out of the way first. So, hey, show the family some love. All right. You can support the Black Men Unfiltered Network by sending Cash App, or you can go ahead and hit that super chat button directly in YouTube. So do like, share, and subscribe, or you can support the fam as I just mentioned. And as far as yours truly, the one you are looking at here, the best way to support me directly, honestly, is go on over to my YouTube channel, hit the like button there, and subscribe if you do feel so inclined. All right. And then come on back on over here. All right, and grab yourself some cold to drink and enjoy the show over here at the Standing on Business podcast. Okay. All right. So with that in mind, today I am going to target a particular executive order today that I've been kind of holding close to the vest. All right, but I haven't been able to really get to it because of all of the, let's say, all of the other things that's been going on relative to deportations, immigration and things of that nature, which things are still going on with that, by the way, just by the way. But take a pause on that for a second. And some other things are happening relative to the legislature and relative to voting as well. All right. Now, before I do that, just take a little breather, and I want to kind of share something with you. So, as you guys know, or maybe you don't, but as you may know, I have a TikTok page. So far, it has, as of today, I do believe it has roughly 900 and so odd followers, almost 1,000. So I'm I'm getting there. Okay, slowly but surely. And I've been strolling the TikTok streets. Okay, and yes, been getting into some political debates over there with some interesting individuals, both on the conservative and liberal side. And I've come across quite an interesting group of people. Okay. And getting up on the panels over there. And I'm just going to say, we are in trouble. All right. Based off of the things that I've seen, things I've seen and things I've heard. The arguments I've heard both on the left and both on the right. But I'm just going to say, people, reading is fundamental. Okay. Reading is so fundamental. And I've heard more platitudes than I have either, factual based information or just opinions. And one of the things one of the situations that I came across is the complete disregard for information and for fact. Okay. Maybe you won't believe this. Maybe you will. I don't know. Put it in the comments if you actually will, if you actually believe what I'm about to tell you. Okay. Or what I'll say when you hear it. So I'm talking about the Supreme Court ruling, the 9-0 ruling. And as I'm talking about it, of course, there's some disagreement relative to what the 9-0 ruling was for, whether it was for Trump or against Trump. Okay, so before I read it, I can kind of maybe I can understand if someone, didn't read it, was confused as to if it was for or against, the left or the right. Let's just be fair. Let's just say. And I already told you guys last week as to how I understood what was going to happen as far as the disinformation campaign. So let's just say, right? Well, I read it. And the person and the people were telling me that, discrediting the source. I turned my phone and I showed that it was no shit, the court document and everything. Okay. No shit. Then they were telling me that, they didn't see that it was a .gov situation, a link. They were discrediting the fact that I highlighted things or, so I found the .gov link, showed them, so on and so forth. Then I read it, and then they asked me, they accused the document of being a liberal document. Now, this is the Supreme Court ruling. And they said that it sounded like a liberal ruling, number one. Then they discredited the Supreme Court because it didn't cite 6 U.S.C. 1223. And they said that the Supreme Court ruling sounded like an opinion. Hey, good evening to you, sir. Salute to you. Now, they said it sounded like an opinion. So right off the bat, my brain starts itching because the judiciary provides interpretive rulings or opinions based off of their interpretation of the law. Okay. So then they asked me, how many judges, or how many of the judges ruled in that particular ruling. And I had already said that it was a 9-0 ruling. And then again, they continued to discredit the Supreme Court because they didn't cite a particular law, as if to suggest that basically they disagreed with the ruling, but they didn't come around to just, it was like pulling teeth to get them to say that they actually disagreed with the ruling. To the extent that basically the Supreme Court ruling didn't matter because the people to which the ruling was about, they were already out of the country for the most part. And when I was trying to get them to just go ahead and tell me if they disagreed or not, they beat around the bush. They wouldn't just say it. And it's just, okay, so what is it? What is it exactly? You have 9 Supreme Court judges, 6 appellate court judges, both from left and right, saying what the law is, what the law isn't, what should happen, what shouldn't happen, even down to the point where they disagreed with the applicability of the 14th Amendment. They read the 14th Amendment and hung their hat on the precursory version part of the 14th Amendment before the semicolon portion of it, and only focused on that and didn't read the part after the semicolon, where it includes, no person shall in the 14th Amendment, suggesting that the 14th Amendment only applies to citizens that are either natural born, or naturalized. And therefore, it had no applicability to immigrants or aliens at all. Then I even had someone tell me, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why this was so important until I came to the understanding that this was something that was touted either on I'll just say right wing media. There we go. But I was told by a Caucasian woman that the real purpose of the 14th Amendment was solely for Black people and slaves. And it never had any applicability to anybody else. Or the intent of it was for targeting Black people or slaves. And it has no applicability to immigrants or aliens. As if a Black man in America needs to be told about the intent of something relative to the Constitution, given that the same constitutional document proclaims to me that at one point I was 3/5 of a person. Okay. But there's a concept here that I'm trying to basically pull out here. And there is the lack of acceptance of information. Supreme Court document says something. You refute what is being said. You refute the veracity or the credulity of an institution simply because you don't like what they say. You don't understand the preponderance of a particular statement in its whole summation, and only one part of it you're willing to accept, but not the meaning of the entirety of the phraseology of the statement, because you don't fully understand how it fits together or how it comprises together in its full phraseology. I don't get it. And if you're incorrect about, if you're correct about the 14th Amendment, given that it doesn't have any applicability to anyone else but naturalized or born naturalized citizens, then I have a question then to all who think that. law, the Constitution, all the laws apply as if the Constitution, relative to the 14th Amendment, applies to all persons, to include all of Title 52 and all of Title 8 of the USC. So I challenge you. Are the laws wrong? Are the judges wrong? And is the Constitution wrong simultaneously? Or are you? Just saying. At any rate, it's an interesting world out here now, where information means nothing, facts mean nothing. And if you just so happen to come across judges or rulings that are actually impartial, it's not enough to be impartial. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So tonight, we're going to get into something else. And tonight, what I want to show you and go over is relative to Executive Order 14248. And specifically, as I mentioned, the dictator targets the elections. This is an executive order that came out that was signed into execution, if I may put it that way, March 25th, 2025. And specifically, it's targeting the election laws for all states. Now, instantly, my thought process when it comes to these executive orders isn't so much what they're doing entirely, but it's also, I wonder, is the why. Why would he go after or alter or augment elections? Why is that? And I have a sneaking feeling that it stems from a couple of things. One, what happened in 2020. Two, what is a foreshadow for what may happen coming up in the midterms. And then ultimately, what he wants to happen relative to elections coming forward. All right. So let's talk about Executive Order 14248. Now, what has happened so far, just to kind of catch you guys up just a little bit here, is this. He writes an executive order, and then what ends up happening is from here, the DNC, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and a few other institutions, such as the League of Women Voters Education Fund, League of United Latin American Citizens, and a few others. Let's see. Democratic Governor Associations, the DNC, the D-Trip, which would be technically the DCCC. All of them get together, and they essentially file a lawsuit against the administration relative to this executive order that you're seeing here. Now, mind you, I didn't go to the whitehouse.gov. I went to the Federal Register to pull the executive order. Okay. So the question here is why? Now, just to kind of recap here as it relates to the elections, I'll play something really quick.
Lost Georgia. It's not. When I heard it was close, I said, there's no way. But they dropped a lot of votes in there late at night. You know that, Brett. And that's what we are working on very, very stringently. But regardless of those votes, with all of it being said, we lost by essentially 11,000 votes. And we have many more votes already calculated and certified to. So I just don't know, Mark, I don't know what's the purpose. I won't give Dominion a pass because we found too many bad things, but we don't need Dominion or anything else. We have won this election in Georgia based on all of this. And there's nothing wrong with with saying that, Brad. You know, I mean, having a correct, the people of Georgia are angry. And these numbers are going to be repeated on Monday night, along with others that we're going to have by that time, which are much more substantial even. And the people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, you know, that you've recalculated, because the 2,236 and absentee ballots, I mean, they're all exact numbers that were done by accounting firms, law firms, etc. And even if you cut them in half, and cut them in half again, it's more votes than we need.
Now, if you recall, at that time, he was talking to Raffensperger, and this was the election in 2020. And there were major litigations around that time and afterwards. 60 different court cases affirmed that there weren't election fraud, you know, happening in a massive, you know, amounts to be able to sway the election at the point in time. Okay. And that's around the time that, this call here happened. And as you can see, Raffensperger's response here.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
So now he's saying to him that the data that he's attributing, and ultimately the data that was presented in all the courts, nationwide for the most part, is incorrect. And that's after Georgia recounted. Now, again, I'm bringing this up because I'm thinking just down the line here, some of why the executive order 14248, I'm thinking that some of the reason why this is going to, you're gonna hear some of this. I'm thinking that this is the precursor or some of the percolating reason as to why this is coming up again in this executive order. Now I have sneaking suspicions also, but again, keeping it fair, you got to kind of consider the source here. All right, so let's go.
A major settlement in the lawsuit accusing Fox News of airing lies related to the 2020 election. Fox and Dominion Voting Systems agreed on a settlement of more than $787 million to avoid a trial. Scott McFarlane was at the courthouse when the deal was announced.
This was the ultimate last-minute settlement. The jury was seated. Opening statements were about to begin when both sides blinked and agreed to an eye-popping dollar figure. Avoiding a trial that would have turned Fox News' biggest stars into star witnesses, the company will cut a $787.5 million check to Dominion Voting Systems.
The president's lawyers alleging a company called Dominion, which
Fox was accused of knowingly airing conspiracy theories and baseless claims falsely linking Dominion to a scheme to flip votes during the 2020 election.
So much for those claims that voter fraud never happens. Of course it happens. They knew it happened.
That's despite evidence, including internal messages in which Fox executive Suzanne Scott warned challenging Trump's bogus claims could hurt ratings.
Today's settlement of $787,500,000 represents vindication and accountability. Lies have consequences.
And the settlement included a public statement from Fox, which Tuesday night said it acknowledged the court's rulings finding certain claims about Dominion to be false. But there was no requirement of an on-air apology or retraction, and Fox attorneys declined to speak to reporters outside the courthouse.
The folks at Fox are big boys and girls, and they can say whatever statement they want in the future to recognize what they did and what this court found. But we think that the dollar figure that they agreed to today speaks for itself.
The settlement spares Dominion from having to put its fate in the hands of 12 jurors and from years of likely appeals if the case went to trial.
They get an acknowledgement that this was wrong, and they get to move on. And in that sense, this is more accountability than people have seen from Fox News.
Dominion still has a defamation lawsuit pending in this same courthouse in front of the same judge against Newsmax for claims made after the 2020 election. And Fox still has a defamation suit against it from voting machine company Smartmatic, which is seeking $2.7 billion, a suit that could yield an even larger sum. Vlad, Anne-Marie.
Okay. And for those cases as well, they also settled, just so you know. So with that in mind, it's quite a big number to settle if things were not true, in the sense that there was disinformation, and intentionally so. So with that in mind, now let's go into the executive order. Now, Now, by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered. Now, despite pioneering self-government, the United States now fails to enforce basic and necessary election protections employed by modern developed nations, as well as those still developing. Now, this is pretty interesting what he's going to say here. India and Brazil, for example, are tying voter identification to a biometric database, while the United States largely relies on self-attestation for citizenship. Now, I find that statement to be very interesting, because you're going to see in the rest of this that nothing in Congress, nothing in his policies, nothing is actually going to be promoting any type of locomotive to continue or to promote, with the current laws anyway, nothing to promote advancement in the voting systems to align to what he's complaining about. I find that very interesting. All right. You're actually going to hear the exact opposite. Actually, you just did, as far as the complaint about the systems and the electronic aspect of it, and the possibility and the vulnerabilities of the system relative to, the electronic aspect of it. I mean, there was the assumption or the accusation that Hugo Chavez in Venezuela was responsible for the tabulation issues in the voting systems, the voting machines, and so on and so forth. So the fact that there is even a complaint about there being a situation where we're not as advanced as other nations, using biometrics and so on and so forth, I find that to be strikingly interesting. But at any rate, all right, in tabulating votes, Germany and Canada require use of paper ballots, counting in public by local officials, which substantially reduces the number of disputes as compared to the American patchwork of voting methods that can lead to basic chain of custody problems. Now, just so you know, our system here, what we typically do is we have a 3-point kind of sort of voting system. In a sense, we have the paper ballot that then gets scanned into like a Scantron type situation. But then again, also, there's also a kind of sort of a backdoor channel where the election official also, manually checks each one as well. So there's a manual log, then there's the paper copy, and then there's the digital portion where the paper is actually scanned into the system. So that's similar to how he's, what he's talking about relative to Canada and Germany. So I find that to be relatively interesting as well. So here we go. Let's continue. So further, while countries like Denmark and Sweden sensibly limit mail-in voting to those unable to vote in person and do not count late arrival votes, regardless of the date of postmark, many American elections now feature mass voting by mail, with many officials accepting ballots without postmarks or those received well after election day. Now, to me, that entire section right there is the crux. It is the heart of this entire executive order. Okay. Damn the rest of what you just heard. This right here is the primary meat and potatoes of this entire executive order, in my opinion. But you be the judge of it from what you can tell. And as far as, many officials accepting ballots without postmarks, you're going to see in the United States codes that he even points out, and the ones I'm going to show you, where that is not legally so. And the evidence that is lacking here and was lacking in the 60 court cases back in 2020, the evidence does not show that. So I find that to be quite peculiar as well, but let's proceed. All right. So moving on. Free, fair, and honest elections unmarred by fraud, errors, and suspicion are fundamental to maintaining our constitutional republic. Nothing to argue there. The right of American citizens to have their votes properly counted and tabulated without legal dilution is vital to determining the rightful winner of an election. I have no problems with that. Under the Constitution, state governments must safeguard American elections in compliance with federal laws that protect Americans' voting rights and guard against dilution by illegal voting, discrimination, fraud, and other forms of malfeasance and error. Yet, the United States has not adequately enforced federal election requirements that, for example, here we go, prohibit states from counting ballots received after Election Day or prohibit non-citizens from registering to vote. Okay, this right here, ladies and gentlemen, is where the BS starts. Okay, right here. Because counting ballots after Election Day, well, for that's a situation of if a ballot is received from a mail-in voting type situation and it's postmarked for before the actual election day, and it's received within the time frame that the state allows, then it's permitted. But you're going to see that as we go forward. Now, received after Election Day or prohibiting non-citizens from registering to vote, again, that too is also illegal. And there are provisions within the state's laws and within the United States Code that prohibits non-citizens from registering to vote. And they have to certify with the federal government that, okay, whatever. So again, this here is a lot of fodder for, yet again, the base to get red meat. But again, now before we continue with what he establishes here, let's hear from his attorney general as to how his attorney general felt before I continue with what he alleges happened.
Of fraud that built up over a number of days, and it was like playing whack-a-mole because something would come out one day and then the next day it would be another issue. Also, I was influenced by the fact that all the early claims that I understood were completely bogus and silly and usually based on complete misinformation. And so I didn't consider the quality of claims right out of the box to give me any feeling that there was really substance here. It got under my skin, but I also felt it was time for me to say something. So I set up a lunch with the AP reporter, Mike Balsamo, and I told him at lunch, I made the statement that to date we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. And the president was as mad as I've ever seen him, and he was trying to control himself. And the president said, well, this is killing me. You didn't have to say this. You must have said this because you hate Trump. You hate Trump. And I told him that the stuff that his people were shoveling out to the public was bullshit. I mean, that the claims of fraud were bullshit. And, he was indignant about that. And I reiterated that these claims on the Dominion voting machines, and they were idiotic claims. I specifically raised the Dominion voting machines, which I found to be among the most disturbing allegations, disturbing in the sense that I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public, that there was this systemic corruption in the system and that their votes didn't count and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense. And it was being laid out there. And I told them that it was crazy stuff and they were wasting their time on that. And it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
Okay, so the very next day, the president released a video rehashing some of the very same claims that his chief law enforcement officer had told him were, quote, nonsense.
We have a company that's very suspect. Its name is Dominion. With the turn of a dial or the change of a chip, you can press a button for Trump and the vote goes to Biden. What kind of a system is this?
I was somewhat demoralized because I thought, boy, if he really believes this stuff, he has, lost contact with, he's become detached from reality if he really believes this stuff. On the other hand, when I went into this and would, tell him how crazy some of these allegations were, there was never an indication of interest in what the actual facts were. In my opinion then, and my opinion now, is that the election was not stolen by fraud. And I haven't seen anything since the election that changes my mind on that.
The complete disregard, the complete recalcitrance of facts. Didn't I mention that before in my intro, where I was talking about the constituency and the citizenry that follow him seem to have a problem with accepting what is not factual or what is not desired? Again, those same people I was talking to on TikTok, I showed them a document with the court number on top, Supreme Court banner and everything, and just could not accept that that was a predominantly conservative court ruling of what the president of the United States and his administration must do. Here, the attorney general, his own attorney general, is telling him that the claims they were spewing about the election was Brad Raffensperger was telling him in 2020 that what he was believing to be the case about the 3 recounts that was happening in Georgia was bullshit. And yet, what he came out with and what was promulgated and promoted and shoveled out for the would-be masses who would just completely consume the orange trough of bullshit. Was that it was stolen. He seems to know an awful lot about what you could do with machines, but neither here nor there. So then now, here comes some more. Bullshit? Okay, let me be fair. So here we go. Now, federal law establishes a uniform election day across the nation for federal elections. Now, he cites 2 USC 7 and 3 USC 1. Now, I'll read a little bit further, but let's go. It is the policy of my administration to enforce those statutes and require that votes be cast and received. Now, pay attention. Cast and received by the election date established in law. Okay, so let's break this down really quick. Okay, so cast and received, okay, on that day. Now, wouldn't be so bad if, if it wasn't proven in certain states, I don't know, certain red states, that where there are certain people predominantly where certain areas where ballot boxes are or ballot, polls weren't being closed down to keep people from voting in certain areas. That wouldn't be so bad, now would it? But I digress. Let's talk about cast and received, and don't listen to me. Let's talk, or let's review his own information. Okay, so he quoted 2 USC 7. So let's go. 2 USC 7. The Tuesday next, the Tuesday next after the first Monday in November in every even-numbered year is established as the day for the election. In each of the states and territories of the United States, the representatives and delegates to the Congress commencing on the third day of January next thereafter. So that's correct. Okay? That's just establishing what the day officially is. Great. All right. So we're good so far. But then we get to 3 USC 1. Now here's where things get complicated. So time of appointing electors. Now, those of you who do not know, let me break it down to you. When you vote for president, you don't vote for president. Let me say it again. When you vote for the president, you do not vote for the president. Who you vote for are the electors for the president. And then the electors vote on your behalf. Okay. That's news for you. Now you know. Okay. Those electors then vote on your behalf in the conventions. And then they are certified. And then by the governor. Okay. And then from there, thank you, sir. And then from there, they go to Congress, where then the president of the Senate then counts the votes for both vice president and president. Okay? All right. So now, with that in mind, now this section starts to make sense. The electors for president and vice president shall be appointed in each state. Okay, so let's break it down. In each state on election day. Now, remember I told you guys that it seems as though certain people of certain cloths, of certain, I don't want to use the word I really want to use, but let's just say certain teams like to only focus on one part, one preclusive part, but not the conclusive part of the entire verbiage or the entire passage. Okay? But there's a comma there. And then there is an inclusive transitional portion that basically adds an element that basically says that there's a component to it. And it says, in accordance with the laws of the state enacted prior to election day. So all of this happens, but with, or in accordance with, in alignment to, while considering of, in accordance with the laws of the state enacted prior to election day. So what that means is, all that's great, but it has to be in alignment with state election laws. Because as it relates to the elections, the federal laws cannot preempt or injure state laws. But state laws also cannot bump up against federal laws either. They have to work together. Okay? As it relates to federal elections. All right. So our dear Orange King forgets that part in here. So best believe that everything after this part, or just about everything in this executive order after this is about to be bullshit, because he's misunderstanding, as most of the time he does when him and his team, when they don't fully read and understand these parts. Okay. So it is the policy of my administration to force those statutes and require that votes be cast and received by election day, by the election date established in law. So again, keep in mind that if it is the law of the state to allow for ballots to be accepted 5 days after the election, provided that the ballot is postmarked before the election day, it can still be counted. All right. Now, you will find out later a little surprise, because it's not just the state law that says that. But let's continue. As the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit recently held in the Republican National Committee versus Wetzel 2024, those statutes set the day by which ballots must be both cast by voters and received by state officials. Now, again, he didn't cite a law, he cited a case. So you know I had to go pull the case, right? Come on. So give me a second, and I will take care of that case for you. But let's read a little bit further. Yet numerous states failed to comply with those laws by counting ballots received after Election Day. This is like allowing persons who arrive 3 days after election, perhaps after a winner has been declared, to vote in person at a former voting precinct, which would be absurd. Several federal laws, including 18 U.S.C. 1015 and 611, prohibit foreign nationals from registering to vote or voting in federal elections. Yet states fail adequately to vet voters' citizenship, and in recent years, the Department of Justice has failed to prioritize and devote sufficient resources for reinforcement of these provisions. Even worse, the prior administration actively prevented states from removing aliens from their voter lists. Interesting. So, really quick, before I go and pull this case right here, let's talk about 18 U.S.C. 1015, shall we? So here's 18 U.S.C. 1015. Now, again, tonight, got a lot of reading for you. So naturalization, citizenship, and alien registry. Now, really quick. Whoever knowingly makes any false statement under oath, in any case proceeding or matter relating to or under or by virtue of any law of the United States relating to naturalization, citizenship, or registry of aliens, or. Now, mind you, I need you guys to understand that this title is for crimes and criminal procedure. And this is for fraud or false statements. Okay, now, he cited the entire subsection. He means for people to go down here to F, right? I'm going to read F really quick. But I want to read Charlie really quick. And I want to read Echo. Yeah. So, whosoever uses or attempts to use any certificate of arrival, declaration of intention, certificates of naturalization, certificate of citizenship, or any other documentary evidence of naturalization or of citizenship of any duplicate or copy thereof, knowing the same to have been procured by fraud or false evidence, or without required appearance or hearing of the applicant in court or otherwise unlawfully obtained, or whosoever knowingly makes any false certificate, acknowledgement, or statement concerning the appearance before him or taking of an oath or affirming of the signature, attestation, or execution of any person with respect to any application, declaring, petition, affidavit, deposition, certificate of naturalization, certificate of citizenship, or other paper of writing required or authorized by the laws relating to immigration, naturalization, citizenship, or registry of aliens. Interesting. One more. Whoever, now I'm building something here. Check it out. Whoever knowingly makes any false statements or claim that he is or at any time been a citizen or national of the United States with the intent of obtaining on behalf of himself or any other person any federal or state benefit or service, watch, to engage unlawfully in employment in the United States. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I went through all of that, C, D, and E, because this represents people who have the responsibility of maybe either representing themselves as, the person who is attesting to be a citizen, or someone who has the responsibility of representing someone or attesting that someone is a citizen. Right? Ladies and gentlemen, when you own a business, you're supposed to have a TIN, which is considered an EIN. Sorry, an EIN, which is considered a TIN. Excuse me, I got it switched. And that EIN allows for you to employ people. And when you employ people, you are supposed to only employ citizens or people with legal ability to be here. And that form is called an I-9. Now, let's take a look. Can illegal aliens complete an I-9? No, they cannot. So, when you have a business owner who's supposed to be attesting that you're paying and withholding taxes from someone who is supposed to be a citizen within the tax system, you are attesting that the people who work for you are American citizens. So, Donnie boy, I have a question for you. How about you put in your executive order, the exact citation for which you are probably criminally liable for, 18 U.S.C. subsection 1015. And I'll go down a little further, ECHO, where you hired illegal aliens to work for your hotels, and you attested that they were legally able to work for you. Otherwise, how are they being paid? I have a question. Additionally, to everyone who seems to think that people are coming here stealing your jobs, they can't steal something that isn't offered to them. The companies that hire them, they have a responsibility to ensure that they are providing a job to an American citizen. Those that didn't, they are doing so illegally. So you wonder why the economy is so reliant on cheap labor. Well, that's the reason why. It's not because illegal people are coming over here and just taking something that belongs to us. You have people who are supposed to be stewards according to 18 USC 1015 Echo, who are supposed to be stewards of jobs, in the sense that they are offering to people. They are supposed to be ensuring that when they hire someone, that they provide an I-9 document to that individual to ensure that they are providing a job and withholding taxes of an American citizen, or at least someone who's legally a legal resident here. But they do so because they don't want to pay an American citizen a rightful fucking salary. It's cheaper to pay them. And so they lie on an I-9 document, knowing that they're not legal. How is that possible? Just lie on it. But if you don't think that's possible, and if you don't think that's happening, then tell that to the Trump administration, who's currently using tax information to find illegal aliens. Tell me something. If they're not possibly in our system somehow by those same documents, then how else are they in our tax system? How else are they paying $22 billion into our Medicare and Medicaid system if they're not having taxes withheld? Just saying. Just something to think about. So, Donnie Boy, thank you for putting this in your executive order. 18 USC 1015 Echo. You are viable to be charged under this section right here. Especially if you are looking in your business. If someone's looking into your businesses and can tell that you have illegal aliens in your businesses currently, and you have hotels, so I'm pretty sure that there are some there, or I'm pretty sure that there were some there before you became president again. Just saying. Now, what the Donald was really trying to cite here in this section right here, what he's trying to cite is this right here. 18 USC 1015 Foxtrot. Whoever knowingly makes any false statement or claim that he is a citizen of the United States in order to register to vote or to vote in any federal, state, or local election, including an initiative, recall, or referendum, shall be fined this title or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here is where it is extremely important to read. You ready? Here we go. Subsection F does not apply to an alien if each natural parent of the alien, or in the case of an adopted alien, each adoptive parent of the alien, is or was a citizen, whether by birth or naturalization. The alien permanently resided in the United States prior to attaining the age of 16, and the alien reasonably believed at the time of making the false statement or claim that he or she was a U.S. citizen. Now, I just want to say that I find it interesting that the Donnie boy decided to put that in his executive order while claiming that several federal laws, including 18 U.S.C. 1015 and 611, prohibit foreign nationals from registering to vote or voting in federal elections, yet states fail adequately to vet voters' citizenship, and in recent years, the Department of Justice has failed to prioritize and devote blah, 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 blah. Hey, salute to you, sir. Good to see you. Hey, Braxton, good to see you, sir. Salute to you as well. Whoops. I find that to be very interesting. So, yes, that is true, but reading is fundamental, folks. Just continue reading. But he also cites 18 USC 611 as well. And folks, what does it say? It shall be unlawful for any alien to vote in any election held solely or in part for the purpose of electing a candidate for the office of president, vice president, presidential elector, member of the Senate, member of the House of Representatives, delegate from the District of Columbia, or resident commissioner, unless nope, I can't. I actually can't. I cannot. He does stupid shit. But to be fair, again, I'm just reading things. I'm reading things as they are, my guy. That's it. So, unless the election is held partly for some other reason, okay? So they can vote for socks. All right. Aliens are authorized to vote for such other purposes under a state constitution or statute or a local ordinance. So they can vote for your shit, just don't vote for my shit. Okay? And voting for such other purposes is conducted independently of voting for a candidate for such federal offices. So they can vote in a mass for something else that is separate and apart, but not direct for the federal office, if that makes any sense. In such a manner that an alien has the opportunity to vote for such other purpose, but not an opportunity to vote for a candidate for any one or more of such federal offices. But again, your president decided to put that into the executive order. But the law has exceptions in there. Okay, any person who violates this section shall be fined under this title and imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. Cool. Now, also in that section, check it out. Subsection A does not apply to an alien if, damn, each natural parent of the alien, or in the case of an adopted alien, each adoptive parent of the alien, is or was a citizen, whether by birth or naturalization. The alien permanently resided in the United States prior to attaining the age of 16, and the alien reasonably believed at the time of voting in violation of such subsection that he or she was a citizen of the United States. Now, when the hell was this put into place? 104th Congress, 96. Republicans have had the House and the Senate multiple times by now. This is one that could definitely be changed. Even in Congress.gov right now, if there was consternation about this mess, the amendment to this isn't even on the docket. Just saying. All right. So, Donnie Boy, I'm confused. All right. So there's problems with the laws that he cited. Okay. But understand that an executive order cannot change the law. And that's what the lawsuit I'm going to be going over with you guys. That's what the lawsuit most definitely goes into. Now, before we continue, I want to also go over this because he cites things, but again, doesn't consider the entirety of what he cites. Just saying. So let's go. Where is... Oh, there we go, right here. All right, so RNC versus Wetzel. Now, this was an interesting read. What you're reading here is essentially a appeals case, a case that got appealed basically by the RNC. So the RNC is essentially the plaintiff. Okay. All right. Basically suing the Louisiana state. Okay. That's what essentially is happening here. Now let's go through this and let's read a couple of things. Okay. Now this is a 3-panel judge, three panel judgeship here. Oops, I can't highlight. All right. So predominantly conservative, BT dubs. All right. So let's read what is happening here. All right. So 2 constitutional provisions are relevant for this case. First, electors clause provides that Congress may determine the time of choosing. They chose choosing right here, but that's how the that's honestly how the Constitution spells choosing the electors for president. U.S. Constitution, Article 2, subsection 1, clause 4. Okay. Pursuant to the Electors Clause, the Second Congress, mandated the state appoint presidential electors within a 34-day period preceding the first Wednesday in December and every 4th year. All right. Some states responded by adopting multi-day voting periods, but this caused election fraud, delay, and other problems. So Congress intervened in 1845, fixing a uniform time for appointing presidential electors on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Okay, so that was codified in 3 U.S.C. 1. That's the one that Trump mentioned. Okay, so now what is the problem here? So these statutes mandate holding all elections. Hold on. Okay, that's still the history. Okay, so here we go. Here's the problem. During COVID-19 C-19 pandemic, Mississippi amended its election laws to accept absentee ballots postmarked on or before the date of the election and received by the registrar no more than 5 business days after the election. All right. Now that was the act of July 18, 2020. Now, after the pandemic, Mississippi has preserved that deadline and amended the statute to cover absentee ballots transmitted by common carriers, in addition to the United States Postal Service. You know, I just realized Mississippi is a red state. So the RNC is fighting a red state, probably because there was an area where they got their asses handed to them in a red state and they didn't like it. I just put that together. All right. On January 26, 2024, plaintiffs, the RNC, Mississippi Republican Party, James Perry and Matthew Lamb sued various state officials in the Southern District of Mississippi to enjoin, basically, admonish them from enforcing the state's post-election ballot deadline. On February 5th, 2024, Plaintiff Libertarian Party of Mississippi brought a functionally identical lawsuit. Both complaints allege the federal election day statutes preempt Mississippi law, basically harms or infringes upon Mississippi law by establishing a uniform day for choosing members of Congress and appointing presidential electors. Okay, so this is the same thing that Trump cited here. 3 U.S.C. 1, 2 U.S.C. 1, chapter 1 and 7. That's the same thing that they did over here. They also brought claims under 42 U.S.C. 1983, alleging violations of the right to stand for public office and the right to vote under the First and 14th Amendment. The district court consolidated the cases. Okay, so they came together. Good. Plaintiffs and defendants jointly moved to schedule briefs and the crossing motions, summary judgment. The district court granted defendants motions for summary judgment on July 28th. Plaintiffs timely appealed, basically giving you the history of what happened. Okay. All right. Turning to the merits, we first describe the preemptive injury that applies in the election law cases, and then B, hold Mississippi's law in hold Mississippi's law is preempted by the Uniform Federal Election Day, basically saying that Mississippi law is preempted by the election day, meaning that the Mississippi law is affected by the federal law in a sense, and they basically hold that. Finally, we explain how historical practice confirms our holding. Okay, so I'm skipping down here. So, all right. So the Constitution struck a delicate balance between the state and federal power to regulate elections. The election clause creates a default presumption of state regulation subject to Congress's powerful check. States can regulate many elements of federal elections, but only so far as Congress declines to preempt state legislative choices. Congress retains the power under the election clause, hear that, to override state regulations by establishing uniform rules for federal elections binding on the states. When Congress exercises that power, any regulations it may make necessarily supersedes inconsistent regulations of the state, given its paramount constitutional authority in this area. Now, very important there's an indication of who has that authority. Congress. Now, you have a president who's basically citing this, pretty well-written, component here, but you have the president trying to usurp, or charge past that authority, that Article 1 authority, using his Article 2 powers, apparently, with his little, damn magic marker shit, okay? Really? Interesting. I told you the man doesn't read. When Congress, okay, so I already mentioned that part. So we're going to skip down here. Now, that presumption does not apply under the election law clause, however, because the power of the election clause confers is none other than the power to preempt. The reasonable assumption is that the statutory text accurately communicates the scope of Congress's preemptive intent. In contrast to the supremacy clause, the election clause affects only an area in which the states have no inherent or reserved power, the regulation of federal elections. Unlike other subjects of federal legislation, election law always falls within the area of the concurrent state and federal power. Emphasis on the original. Okay, we therefore need not employ any presumption against preemption. Don't know if y'all caught that. Our preemption analysis begins with statutory text as interpreted by the Supreme Court. Preemption thus turns to the meaning of election within the day for the election. We must interpret the words consistent with their ordinary meaning at the time Congress enacted the statute. The Supreme Court's decision in Foster v. Love guides our understanding of the statutory text. That case involves Louisiana's open primary system. The state held congressional primary elections in which all candidates appeared on one ballot and all voters could cast their votes. If no candidate won a majority of votes, the general election proceeded as normal on the federal election day between the two candidates with most votes. If a candidate won a majority of votes, however, the election concluded then and there before the election day. The court held this system preempted by 2 U.S.C. 1 and 7 although the Foster Court declined to par the term election in 7 down to the definitional bone, 3 definitional elements bear emphasis here. Here we go: official action, finality, and consummation. We discuss each in turn. What we got here? Hey, CJ Wilkins, good to see you. I am talking about the executive order here. Well, not here, but in the other screen over here, relative to Trump's ability, or attempt at least, to change election law between the states, all right, with his federal pen, and analyzing with the cases that he cited, if that's something that he, as an executive, has the ability to do. And so we're reading what he cited and seeing if indeed what he cited actually agrees with him or not. And so far, not so good. Okay. So down here, the state's problem is that it thinks a ballot can be cast before it is received. What if a state changes its law to allow voters to mark their ballots and place them in a drawer? Or what if a state allowed a voter to mark a ballot and then post a picture on social media? The hypotheticals are obviously absurd, but it should be equally obvious that a ballot is cast when the state takes custody of it. Secondly, finality. The Supreme Court has said the word election now has the same general significance as it did when the Constitution came into existence. Final choice of an officer by the duly qualified electors. An election involves more than government action. It also involves the polity's final choice of an office holder. A voter's selection of a candidate differs from the public's election of the candidate. Officials tally each voter's selection and then declares a winner of the election. Those are not the same thing. And while an individual voter might be able to make his or her selection in private alone, it makes no sense to say the electorate as a whole has made an election and finally chosen the winner before all voters' selections are received. Donnie boy, it's not looking too good for you. Now, mind you, you cited this in your executive order, prompting all of us to go read it. At least those of us who actually will read it. And the reading continues. That is not to say all the ballots must be counted on election day. Whoops. So the case that he cited is arguing the point about the concept of votes being cast and counted on election day as it relates to 3 U.S.C. 1. And the idea of the federal law preempting state law. Okay, I'm just, again, reading it as is. So even if the ballots have not been counted, the result is fixed when all of the ballots are received and the proverbial ballot box is closed. The selections are done and final. By contrast, while election officials are still receiving ballots, the election is ongoing. The results are not yet fixed because live ballots are still being received. Although a single voter has made his final selection upon marking his ballot, the entire polity must do so for the overall election to conclude. So the election concludes when the final ballots are received and the electorate, not the individual selector, has chosen. Mississippi's regulations further confirm this result. The absentee ballot statute authorizes the Secretary of State to issue rules and regulations to effectuate the state's absentee voting scheme. And those regulations state that an absentee ballot is the final vote of a voter when during absentee ballot processing by the resolution board, the ballot is marked accepted. For absentee ballots submitted by mail, the ballot shall be final if accepted by the resolution board after receipt, processing, and deposit into a secure ballot box. Thus, Mississippi's own law belies its mailbox theory of finality. Okay, voters make a conclusive choice, a final selection, and concludes and consummates the election when they mark and submit the ballots as required by law. The final selection is then made. Okay, so with that in mind, there's a lot of pontification going on in this. There's a lot of history going on in this. Ballot is final when accepted by election officials. Again, there's a lot of going back and forth as far as the process of this. But I will tell you, as we get down here, I will read the final decision to you, because the final decision is not what you expect. And it says, today's decision says nothing about remedies. So basically, nothing was remedied at the appellate court. Okay. We declined to grant plaintiffs' initial request for a permanent injunction. Okay, remember the plaintiffs is the RNC, which they have not renewed before this court. Instead, we remand to the district court for further proceedings to fashion appropriate relief, giving due consideration to the value of preserving the status quo in a voting case on the eve of the election. Okay. In addition to their preemption claim, plaintiffs claimed violation of the right to vote and the right to stand for the office under the First and 14th Amendment and brought actions under 42 U.S.C. 1983. The district court concluded that the plaintiffs' appellants' claims under 1983 stand or fall on whether the Mississippi absentee ballot statute conflicts with federal law. Because the district court erroneously concluded that Mississippi statute is not preempted by federal law, we vacate its grant of summary judgment on plaintiff's 1983 claim and remand for reconsideration. So essentially, they took what was decided before, okay, and it basically vacate that decision, but then they remanded the damn case. So up here, they took the plaintiff's decision, the plaintiff's part, and basically provided no remedy to the plaintiffs. So you don't win either. And then what was decided before, they vacated that decision. So down here, so the judgment of the district court is reversed in part and vacated in part, and the case is remanded for further proceedings consistent with this opinion. So essentially, they said, I don't like partially what you did because I disagree. I don't know. So we're going to just vacate this entire thing, dead this in the water for further proceedings. So you're going to ask me, well, boss man, who won? Between the plaintiffs and the defendants, no one did. Who won? The Mississippi law, because Mississippi's law wasn't changed. They're still going to be able to vote in the way that they've been able to vote. Only thing they did was basically argue back and forth as to what they agree or disagree with, but the law is still the law. Now, Trump cited this case because of Kavanaugh's statement here, but the Dems fire back with completing Justice Kavanaugh's quote right here in their filing. Talk about petty. But what's interesting here is that this case right here that I just read to you back from 2024, was it? Yeah. It's a nothing burger for the most part, because it's basically appellate court essentially not coming to a conclusion and remanding in part, vacating in part, not agreeing in part. Some things should be the way that it should be, but it is what it is. They basically said in here also that Congress's silence is pretty much very loud, and they should do more as to defining these things. But apparently Congress can only do certain things whenever it, deems necessary. They know how to, but just choose when they want to. I'm paraphrasing because I'm not going to read the entire 22 pages here, but I did before. It's very interesting. Okay. So back to Trump's executive order. So back over here. So additionally, federal laws should, as the National Voter Registration Act and the HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, require states to maintain an accurate and current statewide list of every legal registered voter in the state. Okay. And the Department of Homeland Security is required to share database information with states upon request so they can fulfill this duty. Okay. 8 USC 1373. C 18 USC 8 USC, excuse me, 1373. Okay, that one's good. All right, maintaining accurate voter registration list is a fundamental requirement in protecting voters from having their ballots voided or diluted by fraudulent votes. Okay, he added a little color to the fraudulent votes, but for the most part, 8 USC 1373, Charlie checks out. Okay, so see no issues there. Now, federal law 15 USC 30121 prohibits foreign nationals. Hang on a second. I need to zoom out just a little bit so I can see the numbers. Why don't I see numbers anymore? Hang on one second. That is strange. Oh, that's because we haven't gotten to the sections yet. Okay, that's why. Okay. So let's see. Federal law 52 USC 121 prohibits foreign nationals from participating in federal, state, and local elections by making any contributions or expenditures. That's interesting because this particular executive order is not really about. It's not really about people, making contributions. So this part seems really out of place to me. If we're talking about illegal people voting, why are we talking about people donating money? Unless we're talking about maybe, illegal aliens maybe donating to campaigns, maybe. I was a little confused by this one. Okay. But 8 USC here. Okay, this one here checks out too. All right. Contributions and donations by foreign nationals. I just found this one interesting considering, everything that happened with, Russia, but, whatever the case may be. It shall be unlawful for a foreign national directly or indirectly to make a contribution or donation of money or other thing of value to make an express or implied promise to make a contribution or donation in connection with a federal, state, or local election. Okay. contribution or donation to a committee of a political party, or an expenditure or an expenditure independent expenditure or disbursement of an electioneering communication within the meaning of the section of 30104 Foxtrot 3 of this title, or a person to solicit, accept, or receive a contribution or donation described in subparagraph Alpha Bravo paragraph 1 from a foreign national. And this part here just describes what a foreign national technically is. Okay, so back here. All right. Let's see. But foreign nationals, now he seems to know a lot about this, so I'm curious. But foreign nationals and non-government organizations have taken advantage of loopholes in the law's interpretation, spending millions of dollars through conduit contributions and ballot initiative related expenditures. This type of foreign interference in our election process undermines the franchise and the right of American citizens to govern their republic. I'm just saying, you seem to know a lot about this, sir. And it seems really out of place and just odd. Salute to you, sir. All right, not a problem. Grab yourself something comes with a drink. All right, we got a whole lot of law to get through. All right, so we're talking about executive order, just so you can catch yourself up there really quick. We're talking about executive order 14248. Okay, I got an amendment rank. Okay, it's right here. All right, targeting elections. Good to go. All right, and the bullshit. All right, so now, above all, elections must be honest and worthy of the public trust. That requires voting methods that produce a voter verifiable paper. No. Wait a second. So right here, above all, elections must be honest and worthy of the public trust. That requires voting methods that produce a voter verifiable paper record, allowing voters to efficiently check their votes to protect against fraud or mistake. Now, class, just 1 second. Didn't he bitch or moan or complain about India and Brazil, for example, are tying voter identification to a biometric database, while the United States largely relies on self-attestation for citizenship? So which is it, Donnie boy? Huh? Which is it? Which is it, Bronzer in Chief? Which is it? Which is it? Because you could have used your, magic marker to tell, the executive branch to start, gearing up to do something about, the fact that we are living in an arcane process for voting. We got thumbprint here, we got shit like that we could, we could do. Oh, but wait a second. The problem is that anytime you tell Americans that they have to give up a thumbprint, biometrics, or whatever, or spit in the tube and give it to 23andMe or whatever the case may be, it's the mark of the beast. It's some sort of fucking conspiracy, whatever the case may be. It's socialism. It's Big Brother. It's whatever the case may be, right? Because things that India and Brazil are doing takes a sacrifice to do. This is when I joke around with my wife. Shout out to my wife, by the way. This is when I joke around to my wife, and I say that we're too free. Because we're so free, we don't recognize that our freedom sometimes gets in the way of progress. And this is an example of this. Because here, he's saying something really great, actually, where India and Brazil, for example, are tying voter identification to a biometric database. So cool. We can do away with our, because I have a voter registration card and it's paper. That shit can be forged. But I have a real ID, by the way. So, when I went and got, my real ID at the DMV, I needed my state issued birth certificate. Okay. I had a copy of that, but I also have a passport. So when I gave them both, apparently the passport did it. They didn't even need the rest of it. The problem is that not everybody has one, but neither here nor there. All of this really resides with the DMV, which you'll see here momentarily. But what I'm confused about here is that we have the opportunity to do this, Donnie. But then you just right. No, I mean, we haven't even left the fucking document yet. And you're saying that it would take verifiable paper record. You're not even advancing in your own document. So which is it, Donnie? Which is it? Huh? Which is it? But again, the problem is that we can't advance because what we do is shit on anything that equates to progression and advancement. We could vote by thumbprint. We could send something in by our phones. We could do that. Oh, but then anything close to something electronic, and we have fucktards who come in and say it was rigged, it was hacked, it was plugged into the Wi-Fi and someone hacked it, like Smartmatic or Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, like he did last time in 2020. Again, I am not coming in here and revealing the skin of my bias. This is what he did. His lawyer, the Dr. Pepper lady, came out and testified in Georgia and in her other case in 2 places to avoid jail time. She testified that it was Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, and she was all out on Fox News and Newsmax and wherever her and Giuliani could be heard, that it was them who were rigging the Smartmatic and Dominion machines. And that's why Fox News received a $787 million lawsuit settlement. Just saying. Anyway, that was a tyrant. That was a rant. Sorry, I digress. The point here is that there's doublespeak. You bitch and moan and complain up here, and the moment you get down here, you're saying this is what we need. Voter verifiable paper record allowing voters to efficiently check their votes to protect against fraud or mistake. Interesting. Election integrity standards must be modified accordingly. Well, what do you got in mind here, Donnie? Now we get into the bullshit. Here we go. Now we get into the bullshit. Now we get to the meat and potatoes of why he's currently being sued, okay, by the D-Trip, the DNC, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and some people. Okay, now we get into Here we go. Okay, so enforcing the citizenship requirement for federal elections. To enforce the federal prohibition on foreign nationals voting in federal elections. So here we go. Foreign nationals. Apparently, there's foreign people voting in our elections. Just let me say something really quick. You have the concept that in order for you to vote, you have to register to vote. In order to do that, you need an ID. And the form to register to vote also asks if you are a citizen. If you lie on that form, what they do is they test that information, they cross-reference that information from the DMV of their state. Don't worry, I'll show you legally where they have to do that. I come with receipts, y'all. Don't worry, I always do. Okay, so anyway, within 30 days of the date of this order, the Election Assistance Commission, who's independent, by the way, president doesn't control that, shall take appropriate action to require in its national mail voter registration form issued under 52 USC 20508. Now, clock this. Here we go. We're going to get to 20508 really quick. Hold on. Documentary proof of United States citizenship consistent with 52 USC 20508 Bravo 3 and a state or local official to record on the form the type of document that the applicant represented as documentary proof of the United States citizenship, including the date of the document's issuance, the date of the document's expiration, if any, the office that issued the document, and any unique identification number associated with the document as required by the criteria in 52 USC 21083 Alpha 5 Alpha, while taking appropriate measures to ensure information security. Wow. Also, for purposes of subsection A of this section, documentary proof of the United States citizenship shall include a copy of. Now, watch this. A U.S. passport, an identification document compliant with the requirements of the Real ID Act of 2005 that indicates the applicant is a citizen of the United States, and an official military identification card that indicates the applicant is a citizen of the United States, or man, it took a while to get to that or, didn't it? Shall. So we have three things before we get to the or, and then we have a valid federal or state government issue photo identification if such identification indicates that the applicant is a United States citizen, or if such identification is otherwise accompanied by proof of United States citizenship. Okay, so you see how that's written, right? So shall this, or this. Y'all see how that's written, right? I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my mind, right? I'm sipping on a Red Bull here, but I'm telling you, I'm not crazy with how I'm reading. And apparently the D-Trip, the DNC, Hakeem Jeffries, and what's his face? Chuck Schumer, they're not crazy either. All right. So let's slow down and let's back this up. Okay, cool. Let's start with 52 USC 20508. Shall we? Oops. All right. So, what's the problem with this one? Let's go through my notes really quick. All right. So the problem with this is that the required mail-in ballot information. All right. So one, you're requiring the Election Assistance Commission to do something. You don't control that. That's an independent agency. That's one. Two, you're coming in here and you're telling them to change the information on the ballot. Understand that the ballot is controlled at the state, constitutionally anyway. Okay? So when we start talking about the Constitution, understand that that is held at the states. Times, oops, here we go. Times, places, and manners of holding elections for senators, representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislatures thereof, but the Congress may. Okay, so, oops, is that the 14th Amendment? It is 17th Amendment. Okay, so let's go to the elections portion. Fourth Amendment. That's the Senate. I need to get to the amendments. No, I need to get to the original part of the Constitution, and let's get to executive, and then section 2. No, 1. It's 1. There we go. Found it. Sorry. Took me a second. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for 2 persons, of whom one at least shall be an inhabitant of the same state. So that's pretty much what's happening here. Okay, so start there. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by a ballot of 2 persons. So right there, let's skip on back over here. Understand that you're coming in here and saying that something should change at the ballot level. The states control the ballot, not the president. Hell, not even Congress controls the ballot. Now, I did read where the president, or the government can effectuate what's on the ballot or influence what's on the ballot, but most definitely not the executive. The executive, I don't know how many times that I have to say this, but the executive can only execute what is lawful, not create law. So all you orange, fellatio-loving individuals who only love presidential overreach whenever the orangeman is sitting at the Oval Office, the executive does not make law. The executive only executes law and enhances what is lawful. So imagine the law is a coloring book. The executive colors in the law. You cannot color outside the law as the executive. That is not the executive's job. So that is the problem with this portion right here. If we're looking at 52 USC 508. Okay. Now, let's see. In consultation with the chief election officers of the Senate, of the states, shall provide such regulations as necessary to carry out paragraphs 2 and 3. In consultation of the chief election officers of the states, shall develop a mail voter registration application form for elections for federal office. So they shall do that, not you. No later than June 30th of each odd numbered year shall submit to Congress a report assessing the impact of this chapter on the administration of elections for federal office during the preceding 2-year period, and including recommendations for improvements in the federal and state procedure forms and other matters affected by this chapter, and shall provide information to the states with respect to the responsibilities of the states under this chapter. Did that say anything about the president coming in and waving his wand and saying what should be on the ballot? No. Not at all. Okay. So again, by the president coming in and saying what you're going to do, citizens, what you're going to do, election assistance commission shall do this. What you're trying to do is come in and you which is doublespeak. You're saying in accordance to, but you're changing what it's according. Therefore, you're acting, ultra vires. You're acting outside of your authority. And that's the problem with this part of the executive order. Moving right along now, I also want to take you to, really quick, since we went to this part here of 205, there's also a part down here that says go to 20507. And it says the information required on the form, so it says may not include any requirement of notarization or other formal authentication, and shall include in print that is identical to that used in the attestation portion of the application, the information required in section 205.07 A5A and Bravo of this title. So it's saying what's going to be included: contents of the mail voter registration form. The mail voter registration form developed under this section, A2, may require only such identifying information, including the signature of the application of the applicant, and other information, including data relating to previous registration by the applicant, as is necessary to enable appropriate state election officials to assess the eligibility of the applicant and to administer voter registration and other parts of the election process. So the administration is talking as if the things that he's having consternation about isn't already happening, isn't already lawful. Here we go. So let's take a little gander over to 205. I think it's, hold on, let me scroll up. Yeah, it's 205.07. Requirements with respect to the administration of voter registration. I love this part. In general, okay, the administration of voter registration for elections for federal office, each state shall, I love this shit. It says, ensure that that any eligible applicant is registered to vote in an election. That is important. Eligible applicant. That is important. Let's continue. In the case of registration with the what? What does that say, folks? Let me just scroll on in. That says motor vehicle application. Ladies and gentlemen, that is your local DMV. Hot dog. You mean to tell me that you can do this at your local DMV and it's part of the United States Code already? Now, check this out. When you go to the DMV, everybody's been to DMV who drives or whatever the case may be. When you go to DMV, they ask you if you are a citizen. And if you say yes, you provide documentation that proves, that substantiates that you are a actual no shit citizen. If you don't, guess what? They don't mark you as a fucking citizen. So all of this shit that people are saying is happening relative to people voting illegally, or even the clause that was provided over here at what is this, 18611. You think that this exception down here, an alien reasonably believes at the time of voting in violation of such subsection that he or she was a citizen at the time that he or she was voting, you think that's happening writ large? No, it's not. Because in order for you to register to vote, you have to be able to prove that you are a citizen. So even if you could walk up to some place and take the action of voting, you got to have an ID. And where do you get IDs from, ladies and gentlemen? You get them from the fucking DMV, my guy. And all of this is kept at the DMV. So all of this bloviating and pontificating and shit about there being illegal people voting and all this and all that, because this is where this executive order is stemming from. In addition to being red meat, okay? All right, that's A. Now let's look at B. I'm sorry. So in the case of registering with a motor vehicle application under section 20504, if the valid voter registration form of the applicant is submitted to the appropriate state motor vehicle authority not later than the lesser of 30 days or the period provided by state law before the date of the election. Now check out Bravo for a second. In the case of registration by mail under section 20505 of this title, if the valid voter registration form of the applicant is postmarked no later than the lesser of 30 days or the period provided by state law, here we go again, before the end of the election. So again, all of this is considering no lesser than 30 days. Okay. So, well, postmarked no later than the lesser of 30 days. So the largest permitted or permissible is 30 days. Okay. So states have a 30-day window. Okay. But no state is using 30 days. That's law. Ladies and gentlemen, that's law. But then it summates with what? Or the period provided by state law. So it makes room. It includes after what it precludes with. See, context clues is important, Trump supporters. It is important. And I gotta tell you, people who read and provide information, we kill you guys every time with context and nuance. We do. Yes, it says postmarked no later than less than 3 days. But my guys, you can't stop there because the sentence doesn't stop there. There's a fucking comma there. Or the period provided by state law before the date of the election. So you have contingencies there. You have conditions there that complete the entire verbiage. Damn it. All right. The lack of ability to understand the entire passage based off of the construct of a statement is why people think that the 14th Amendment only applies to people who are born here or naturalized here. There's an entire group of Americans who thinks that the Supreme Court got it wrong because the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to anybody but who was born here or naturalized here. And my entire thought process is this.
How are you getting lost? How is
that even possible? How are you getting lost? It clearly states. Anyway, all right. So coming back over here. So, all right. So he goes on further. Okay, I'm going to skip down here to this part. The head of each federal voter registration executive department or agency under the National Voter Registration Act, 52 USC 20506, shall assess citizenship prior to providing a federal voter registration form to enrollees of public assistance programs. So essentially what's happening there is the administration wants to do something. They want to, before anyone gets their ballot, what they're wanting to assess if the people getting ballots are citizens or not. Now, this may not be that bad of an idea, but here's the problem. That's a conflict of interest. Here's why. First of all, that's the job of the EAC. Next thing is it's also the job of the states to run their own elections. But tertiarily, you're the president, your administration, and they're voting ostensibly for you. And you're trying to control who's voting for you, even though it's under the auspices of ensuring that the people who are voting for you are indeed legal. or maybe voting for the other person legally. You see what I'm saying? Can anyone else see how that's a conflict of interest, irrespective to who is asking for that ability, power, or authority or permission? Just saying. Take any of these things that I'm talking about and take the red president out and plug in the blue president and ask yourself, would that be okay? In fact, when any of these fucking things, take the red guy out who's presenting orange and put in the blue guy and ask yourself, would you allow that? Okay. Whew. All right. And then, of course, he wants, Doge to be a part of and have access to the information. He wants to try to, those who are not following the laws, whatever, he wants to control, how much money, if any money, goes to those who are not following, said protocols, which some of that may be legal, but maybe not. That part I can't actually define yes or no, because technically funding does go to some of these agencies, or some of these states, but they have to be compliant to certain laws. But what I find interesting is he cites this part. Now, audits and repayment of funds, record keeping requirements, blah, 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 blah. Recoupment of funds if the Comptroller General determines, as a result of an audit conducted under subsection B prior to November, what does that say? 26 of 2014. Class, what date is it? Oh, shit. Now, hold on. I got to find where he cited that, so I'm not making it up. Hold on. So here we go. So following the audit of the HAVA, fund expenditures conducted pursuant to 52 USC 21-142, the Election Assistance Commission shall report any discrepancies or issues with an audit state's certifications of compliance with federal law to the Department of Justice for appropriate enforcement action. There it is right there. See? Buddy, it doesn't apply. You're trying to recoup funds with a... Okay. Just saying. Because he cited the whole thing. Maybe if he cited A specifically or B, but that's just the audits. But if he's trying to take away money as a punishment for certain things, well, this entire thing only applies to that. So, boy, he sucks at this. Okay. At any rate. Now, let's talk about before it gets to a point where we need to get out of here. I want to show you what the judge said. What did the judge say? Here we go. Back over here, and let's go to, where'd he go? All right. So, for the reasons stated in the accompanying memorandum or opinion, it is ordered that the joint 34 motion, 34 people joined on that lawsuit, by the way, for that ass. motion for the preliminary injunction filed by the League of United Latin American Citizens, the Secure Families Initiative, and the Arizona Students Association. Collectively, the LULAC plaintiffs and the League of Women Voters Education Fund and the League of Women Voters of the United States and the League of Women Voters of Arizona, the Hispanic Federation, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the OCA, the Asian Pacific American Advocates, and the Asian and Pacific Islander American Vote. Collectively, the League plaintiffs is granted. Boy, they got on that ass, boy. And the 53 motion for a preliminary injunction filed by the Democratic National Committee, Democratic Governors Association, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, the DSCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, U.S. Senate Minority Leader Charles E. Schumer, the U.S. House Minority Leader Hakeem S. Jeffries. Collectively, the Democratic Party plaintiffs granted in part and denied in part as follows. God damn. So, the LULAC plaintiffs and League plaintiffs joint 34 motion and the Democratic Party plaintiffs 53 motion are both granted as to Section 2A of the Executive Order 14248. Defendants U.S. Election Assistance Commission, EAC, Donald L. Palmer in his official capacity as chairman and commissioner of the EAC, Thomas Hicks, Benjamin W., Hovland and Christy McCormick in their official capacities as commissioners of the EAC, and Brian Schlitz in her official capacity as executive director of the EAC are preliminarily enjoined. That means you are barred. You're being held. Okay, you're being fired, punished, whatever, from taking any action to implement or give effect to 2A of the Executive Order 14248, including taking any action based on the executive order to modify the content of the federal voter registration application form described in 52 U.S.C. 20508A2 to require documentary proof of United States citizenship. So it's not to say, mind you guys, I showed you guys in law that they already have to do that. They already have to. But what Trump is trying to do to come in and step on that, that's what they are enjoining. That's what they are basically doing a preliminary injunction upon, essentially. So it's not, so before some red Make America Great Again 45 and 47 motherfucker come in here and try to say that the Democrats won't, they don't want to come in here and verify citizenship. No, I showed you in law where citizenship has to be maintained, has to be verified anyway. The problem is that when the president comes in here and tries to do something extra in an area where he has no authority, that's the problem. And you cannot mandate something in an area where you don't belong. Essentially, mind the business that pays you. Enjoy the fact that what we do gets you fucking elected. Hell, I mean, you're not going to be benefiting from being elected no fucking way anymore. Remember, you're not running a third term. Oh, that's right. You want to run again. That's right. All right, here we go. The Democratic Party's party plaintiff motion is granted as to Section 2D of the Executive Order 14248. All right. And let's skip on down to where it says preliminary enjoined from taking. So it's basically saying that all of these different agencies here, Kelly Loeffler, the Secretary of Interior, Douglas Burgum, DOD, Department of Defense, whoever, all those people right there. Okay, cool. All of them people are enjoined. Okay, they're being sanctioned. Okay, from taking any action to implement or give effect to 2D of the Executive Order 14248, including failing to provide the federal voter registration application form described in 52 U.S.C. 20508A2 or an equivalent form to any applicant for service or assistance based on an inability to assess citizenship. Essentially, you're not assessing shit. You're not going to be in a position to assess anyone before voting. That is the job of the states. You're not going to be able to go in and check voter registration and all that BS, beforehand. That's what 2D essentially does. Okay, so 2A and 2D of the executive order that I read is essentially enjoined. Done. Now, what was denied? Their plea for 2B, 7A, and 7B of the executive order. It says, for the reasons stated in the accompanying memorandum opinion, no plaintiff is required to post an injunction bond or any other security as a condition of obtaining the injunctions described in this order. Nothing in this order or the accompanying memorandum opinion shall prevent defendants from taking any lawful action that is not based on 2A or 2D of Executive Order 14248 or any substantially similar instruction by the president. So ordered. And this here, Colleen Kolar-Kotelly is a Democrat judge. So she didn't just give them everything they wanted because she was a Democrat. Oh, so those of you who say, oh, well, only Republican judges are able to be, unbiased or impartial. Well, here you go. Democrats didn't get everything they wanted. And there's reasons for that. So there it is. Now, I can read to you some of the things that they actually presented in their complaint. Okay? But for the most part, most of their complaint focuses on the constitutionality of the executive order. Okay? Yes, they did talk about, the financial aspect of it and the constitutionality of a couple of other things for the most part. But for the most part, it was mainly about the overreach, the constitutional overreach of the executive, basically coming in and stepping on Congress's power to effectuate election laws. In a sense, if election laws are going to change for the states, it is Congress who has that ability to do so, not the president, for sure. And then 2, coming in and essentially trying to just overhaul states' rights to control their own elections too. Okay, it is between the states and Congress, not the executive. Because remember, the executive does not make laws. The executive only provides color to the laws. That's it. And enforces the motherfuckers. That's it. So do your job. Enforce them. That's it. Enforce them and spend the money. That's it. Outside of that, ultra vires, Mr. President. Ultra vires. So, with that in mind, this is going to be an executive order that, for the most part, there was pretty much 3 total lawsuits for this one. I have a feeling that we're going to have more lawsuits or continued litigation on this based off of what was in the executive order. But I think, for the most part, that now that we have preliminary injunctions on those aspects, what was it? Hang on. It was 2A, 2D, Yeah, 2A and 2D. That's pretty much the bulk of the actual order. Yeah, there are other parts to the order, but without those first ones, you really can't really get much control over everything else, really. And if something else were to arise, from their actions, like for instance, subpoenaing, voter information or whatever the case may be, that can just be another lawsuit. Okay, but the fangs of this one has been basically taken out by taking away, certain documentary proof, trying to come in and assess citizenship ahead of, voters coming in and voting, and breaching that kind of barrier between, or sovereignty in a way, between federal elections, or sorry, federal entity and state entity, as it relates to the alignment of state election laws and federal election laws. And they are more aligned than you think. If you go down Title 52, for the most part, Title 52, from the federal government's perspective, does indeed provide a guideline for states. It just doesn't restrict states for the most part. So all these things that people within the government, or even constituencies, or even Congress is saying that states are doing, I don't see how, if the EAC is actually doing what it's supposed to do, which is oversee. Yeah, you may have some onesie and twosies here for the most part, but when Bill Barr told Trump back in 2020 that this shit was bullshit, reading these laws and how accountable they have to be in order to receive funding, I have to acknowledge that, yeah, it was probably some bullshit. And again, ask for some proof, people. Where do you see large amounts of voter fraud? In the areas that you do see the fraud, where it might be someone who was supposed to be, removed, but they weren't because, something happened, and it happened after a point in time that the, elections were certified, or whatever the case may be. A dead person stayed on the voter registration. Well, did that person vote? How could they? They were dead. Somebody attempting to vote twice. But is it happening so widespread that you lost because of it? And if so, challenge it in a court. When 60 courts tell you that you're wrong, my guy, you're probably wrong. No, not probably. You're definitely dead wrong. Okay? So, my guys, my people, all I got to say is, don't be like these people in the damn on the damn TikTok streets. Okay? Reading is fundamental. Read more, learn more. Okay? I cannot tell you. And when I leave out of here, I'm probably going in TikTok streets to listen to some more bickering and bantering. Hopefully not a lot of platitudes, but I will tell you, the things that I hear quite often are just meaningless platitudes. Just meaningless. I mean, and again, without basis of merit of fact. And I just don't understand it. And then when you try to show them any type of fact, any type of regulation, or even try to explain to them the piece or the component that they are missing, what grinds my gears about all of it is that they are recalcitrant to knowing or understanding anything else than what they are willing to accept. And I don't understand why. Oh, wait, I think I do. And that is the fear of being ostracized by the people who are part of the group, part of the gang, part of the cult, if you will. And we've seen what happens to people when they don't align to the group. They get told that they're rhinos. They get told that that they get threatened. They get demeaned, exculpated, excoriated, extirpated. Okay? Which word do you want? Excommunicated. So it's better to just go along than to point out that maybe something is most definitely wrong. So with that, I appreciate everyone for being here. Make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. Let's keep the conversation going, people. Okay? This one here was an interesting one. Like I said, I've been holding on to this one for a while. But we'll see where this one goes. I'll keep my eye on this one. I doubt that this one will actually make it to the Supreme Court. I doubt it. We'll see. Maybe around election time, maybe this one will come back up again. We'll see. But I doubt this one will actually make it. But with that in mind, let's keep the conversation going. I appreciate you guys for being here. And with that in mind, like I tell you, read. Okay? Fucking read. Okay? Be informed, not disinformed. Okay? And be objective. Okay? Let's be objective thinkers. All right. And whatever you learn, hopefully you learn something and out of the subjective world and into the objective light. Okay. And whatever you've learned objectively, all right, stand on that shit. All right. Salute to you, everyone. Good night.